name is Victor Pepple. Quickly, just to put this out there, it's 9 days to the end of the continuous voters registration. Now, I hear the registrations are ongoing over the weekend, so take advantage of it. If you do not have a PVC, if you do have one, try to revalidate. Go and check and ensure that that polling unit is where you're supposed to cast vote, because INEC expanded polling units. You might not be using the same polling units. Find out, please. If it's not your polling unit, apply to transfer to a polling unit near you. Not too many people are aware of this. The deadline for voters registration is next week, Sunday, the 31st of July. All right, now let's get into it. Welcome to the show. For the next 30 minutes, bringing analysis is Waji. Good morning, Waji.
Morning, Victor. How you doing?
I'm all right.
Yeah.
Great to have you in the studio.
Yes, indeed. It's good to be back. Good to be back.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Now, you listening can be part of the show, sending messages across to us on WhatsApp. It's 0809 4440981. We are on Twitter at Smooth981FM. We're streaming live on YouTube. It's Smooth981FM Lagos. Starting things off from the New Telegraph today is this headline: Death servicing finally surpasses revenue as federal government releases first quarter data. Now, the cost of servicing debt surpassed the federal government's retained revenue by 310 billion naira in the first 4 months of this year. The federal government said this in its 2022 fiscal performance for the first quarter released on Thursday. According to the document, the federal government's total revenue for the period was 1.6 trillion naira, while debt servicing gulped 1.9 trillion. Now, just to take a message from the Minister of Finance, she said urgent action is needed to address revenue underperformance and expenditure efficiency at national and sub-national levels. What's your reaction to this, Waji?
What a way to start off on Friday, everyone. And I think my position, Victor, is that I don't believe anybody should be surprised. This has been coming for quite a while. This is what happens when you make it a policy, so to speak, to continue borrowing yourself out of trouble without focusing on how best can you make money from a revenue perspective, or how best can you put austerity measures in place to save money. And then when you continue with that particular habit and that particular behavior and that particular culture, this is where you find yourself when it's no longer guaranteed that your revenues can be able to surpass your debt servicing ratio, which is where we find ourselves now. Revenues have been dwindling for quite a number of years, and then I think we now began to see the sharp downward effect of that during COVID and then subsequently after all those years, especially when you now begin to look globally. Oil revenues are just not what they used to be. That's number one. And then number two, when you look at the rising security and our inability to even keep up with the production requirements to make our revenue targets, given that we are so dependent on that from a national perspective, we are going to find ourselves in this situation. And then also on top of that, Victor, when we do not diversify and encourage enabling environments for other aspects of the economy to be able to now create export opportunities for you to earn forex, to now be able to control your revenues, these are the challenges you're going to have. So it's a very, very shockingly annoying, embarrassing situation to be in, but nobody should be surprised. When you think about what the Debt Management Office did in the Obasanjo administration back in 2006, when we were able to now get debt forgiveness worth $30 billion when we made that last payment, and this was in April 2006, and to think that 16 years later, we've now done an absolute turn, and our external debt is now $100 billion. We need to ask ourselves some very serious questions about how government are governing. And these are the problems that we find ourselves in Nigeria. It goes just beyond analytics and numbers. It's actually about what are the leadership doing? Why did we and how did we even get to this particular place to begin with? And what are we going to do to move forward? The Minister of Finance has talked about urgent action. The only thing you can really do right now, if you cannot necessarily with an immediate effect ramp up revenues, the only thing you can do is curtail expenses to at least now give you a break so that you're not falling further and further down that rabbit hole. Whether or not they choose to do that is going to be a reflection of how seriously they take this matter.
It's common knowledge Nigeria is hugely and totally dependent on oil.
Yes.
Now, we generate revenue from oil, but we have to pay for subsidy in trillions as well. That's on one
That's
hand.
another problem. Yeah.
On the other hand, how are we going to generate non-oil revenue the government is not telling us? Or what can we do to generate more non-oil revenue? That's on one hand. From this report as well, we spend billions on capital expenditure, when the conversation is also there that we should cut cost if we want to improve the way, I mean, things are in Nigeria at the moment. We're hearing of creation of more commissions and agencies. Is that what we need at this time? Let's
No.
see if we can unpack all of that.
No, to answer the last question, no, we don't need more agencies and commissions. We just need a deliberate federal government that takes this thing a bit seriously and then now cuts back on their recurring expenditure. It's really just that simple. It's just something they need to decide to do. The cost of running government is extremely high when you look at salaries and then they're running operational expenses and everything else. It just doesn't make any sense. If you were to able, even if you were able to shave off 10 to 15% of the current cost it is to run government, that will give you some significant savings that can go towards anything. Your earlier question, which now came towards what can we do to encourage diversification of other revenues, you have to create an enabling environment for entrepreneurs. You have to create an enabling environment for industrialists. It's the only way it's going to work. People cannot sustain if they don't, number one, have power, if they don't, number two, have infrastructure, and if they don't, number three, have security. These are the things that any enabling environment creates for opportunities for entrepreneurs to be able to make money. If I mean entrepreneurs will be able to do business, because if they're able to do business, then they can be able to export locally made goods and services.
Right.
Well, it's two things actually. They can create goods and services for internal consumption. That's
Right.
number one, and then they can create goods and services for external consumption, which now gives you forex. But you have to have the enabling environment in place for these things to happen. And without government creating those three aspects that I mentioned, we're not going to have this. We're just going to continue to have this conversation.
You're very right, because I recall this administration had said, "Oh, we're going to diversify from oil, so agriculture will be our mainstay. We're going to make sure we have so much of it in the country, and even export some of our agricultural produce." I don't know where we are with that.
We're nowhere with that. It's just that simple because we can't get our farming strategy together. It's very, very difficult to do that.
But the farmers also complain about security.
That's the point I'm trying to make. So we can't, that is literally your farming strategy. It has nothing to do with weather. It has nothing to do with soil. It has nothing to do with what you need to grow. That's not the issue. We are blessed with fertile land. We're blessed with wonderful weather. We're blessed with predictable seasonal outcomes. So we know exactly what to do in that capacity. The challenge is, from a farming strategy, we cannot simply get that together from a security point of view, from an allocation point of view, from a guaranteed perspective of how your crops are going to come out and it's not going to be destroyed or distorted by herdsmen or by any other influx of terrorists, things of that nature. That is the exact challenge that we're having, Victor. We're not just being able to get things that we can control right.
Taking things to the Guardian newspaper this morning, JAM announces 140 as cutoff mark for university admission. Now, the Joint Admissions and Matriculation Board and heads of tertiary education institutions and other stakeholders in the education sector in the country have announced minimum cutoff mark for admissions in the 2022-2023 academic session. Ooh. How did we get here? Number one, where are we going with this? I recall it used to be way more than a 180, 200 a few years ago. Right now we're seeing 140 as cutoff mark for university admissions.
You're asking how we got here. Okay, let me look at it this way. I personally don't understand the purpose of a national cutoff mark in terms of minimum requirement for JAM. I don't get it. I think every university should be able to make that determination as to what the minimum entry requirement should be. But based on this particular article, what JAM is saying is that across board, you will have other universities that maybe have higher cutoff marks like 180, 200, 220, depending on the institution. But what they're saying is that as a base level, absolute zero, regardless of whatever institution or polytechnic exists, it cannot be below 140.
Let me put things in proper perspective. The registrar of JAM revealed that only 378,639 out of 1,761,338 who wrote the exams scored above 200.
So that's less than 20%. Right?
Exactly. And so it made them bring down the cutoff mark to 140. Is the quality of education reducing in Nigeria?
And the quality of education is reducing because the federal government have not made the necessary investments into education because it's not a top priority. And this is what happens when you do not make investments into education, especially at the primary level, then you get these kind of low marks. I mean, this is absolutely shocking that when you think about 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, you looked at the average number of JAM. It was, like you said, 180, 200. It was some, that was majority of the people who
Mm-hmm.
were taking it.
Mm-hmm.
I remember people who were getting 200 back in the day. I mean, I never took JAM, unfortunately, but I remember people who did take JAM getting 200 and not being able to get into some very good schools. So you actually had to get a lot higher. So the point I'm trying to make is that this is the attitude of a government that are mediocre by definition and mediocre by behavior. You do not reduce the entry requirements for a matriculation exam that you need to get into a tertiary education. That is not forward progress.
Now this
That
is
is not how you move.
140 over 400.
Thank you very much. I don't even understand that. That is what
My
30%.
goodness.
That I don't get it.
140 over
I'm not.
400.
I don't have the capacity to process it. That's just it.
Anyways, let's keep things going quickly. A bill to make JAM results valid for 4 years passes second reading. The amendment of the JAM Act was sponsored by Tolulokpe Shadikpe or at the plenary on Thursday, and he was saying, a lot of people sit for these exams. They come out with good grades for one reason or the other. They end up not getting admitted into our universities, and they keep writing again. So if this is signed into law, uh, if you pass the exams, perhaps not 140, for the next 4 years, it will be valid.
Okay. So here's my question. So if you take, and please help me out here, Victor. If you take JAM,
Mm,
and for whatever reason you can't get into university, just whatever, things happen, and let's say you want to now try for admission a year later, the way things are currently,
right.
do you have to take JAM again? The way things are now,
If you do not, yes, you have to.
you have to take it again.
Mhm.
Okay, you see that I don't understand. Because I know, when you look at comparisons that were made in this article with the SATs, for example,
Mhm.
the SATs are valid forever. I took my SATs almost 30 years ago, and it's something that I can still access now and still use now. If I wanted to, for whatever reason, go back to university to get another bachelor's degree, I can still use that particular SATs from almost 30 years ago. So my point is, I like the attitude that they're going in reference to the general direction of the validity of the JAMB examination for 4 years. I think that's fine. I think it's a step in the right direction because not much is going to change at that particular time. So I think it's something that can be evolved. I like that it's gone past the second reading, and I think it's something that people should not be punished for. That for whatever reason they couldn't attend university, at least they have that 4 year validity period to be able to make up. So I think it's a step in the right direction.
Now let's take it to premium times where Nigerian government may ban motorcycles. Minister of Justice Abubakar Malami disclosed this yesterday, and he says that the ban is being considered as part of efforts to curtail activities of terrorists who often use motorcycles.
Have you ever heard of the term you're putting a band-aid or the equivalent plaster over a gunshot wound? That's exactly what we're doing here. I'm not quite sure why we think banning motorcycles vis-a-vis Okadas is the way in which you're going to curtail terrorism. Because the logic that is being applied is that a lot of terrorists use motorcycles. So therefore, if we ban motorcycles, we somehow have cut off a transportation network for terrorism. That is not how you fight terrorism. Terrorism is an ideology. The militarization of it with which people attack is just a manifestation of how people choose to express themselves when they are terrorists. But you do not cut off the root, which is the ideology itself. You attack the ideology by combating it with making sure people have something to do and they're not idle individuals who are just happening to be around that can easily be recruited by terrorists. So until you begin to get that perspective correct, we're just going to continue to have this rigor mortis dance where we actually don't achieve anything. And I'm not quite sure why we keep going on and on with these very knee-jerk reactions to how we want to handle something like this. Terrorism and fighting terrorism takes time. You have to ask yourself, why does it exist? Why are people easily recruited? And I can easily answer it for you, Victor. It's a function of poverty. It's a function of people not having things to do. It's a function of inflation being at 20%. It's a function of unemployment being at 39%. So when you now begin to have these factors, Nigeria, unfortunately, in certain regions, is ripe for the recruitment of terrorists. So if the government actually wants to be serious about fighting terrorism, it's not by banning motorcycles, it's by beginning to figure out how to inject some kind of activity into those areas around reducing inflation and reducing unemployment, giving people something to do so they are no longer distracted by the attractiveness of becoming a terrorist. that guarantees them pay versus not doing anything at all.
Thank you very much, YG. But taking it over to your messages on WhatsApp, D from Alausa is saying retained revenue is not same as revenues. It is retained revenue that is now lower than debt. Is now lower debt servicing. Okay, I see your message. Ezudo from Lekki in Nigeria. The widely traveled road by successive federal and state governments is to borrow. No serious efforts are made towards creative revenue generation in Anambra, my home state. Governor Soludo just got the House of Assembly to approve a loan of 100 billion naira for his government. That's just 5 months into administration. I wonder the debt legacy he will leave behind by the time he completes his 4 year tenure. There's nothing wrong with borrowing if you have an economic plan to pay back.
Exactly.
All right, quickly, let's take it to Joseph May, who says, I agree with your analyst. Why is government not pragmatic? Why is it difficult to downsize over bloated ministries, reduce salary and benefits of lawmakers? They should create an environment which businesses can thrive and grow. Stop unnecessary loans that are squandered, nothing is shown for it, and paying a fantastic scam called subsidy. May God help us. Samuel in Lekki, how do we earn more money from sources other than oil? You mean from agriculture and manufacturing exports? Those sectors, uh, are you there? Oh, well, they're sieged by bandits and foreign exchange challenges, respectively. This government is not serious about solving either of them. No be for this country and aid to the president blamed people killed and kidnapped by bandits for going to farm without taking permission from bandits. Wow. Okay. Mr. Purple asked how we got here with jam court of mark. Your president doesn't need university education to be Nigeria's president. That's how we got here. Ken, you had to take it there.
And he did.
Minimum cutoff mark is 140. Something is wrong with us as a country. What is all this talk about minimum mark? These regulatory agencies are the problem. 30% of an exam as cut off, it is finished. Jam valid for 4 years? Let us see. Okay, Idima Puza, I don't need a soothsayer or a prophet to know that the next president would take some time to explain the wrath he'll meet in our rotten economy. A country paying higher to service debts than generated GDP is heading into bankruptcy. May God help the incoming
Oh no, we're
president.
not heading. We're there. Just make that very clear. We, by all definitions, we're there.
All right. Samuel from Ace from Agor. Yes, so the government should ban Okada, throw more people into unemployment, thereby creating more potential criminals. The federal government knows nothing. Well, different take this morning. The government and the president is not honest. During their campaign in 2014, the president promised to cut cost of governance. He promised to even sell off some of the presidential jets. Uh, by 7 years down, we've seen more wasteful spending on borrowed money. So sad. Jerry came in with that one. In 1994, I scored 273, and the cutoff mark then was 286
There
for
you
my
go.
first choice.
There you go.
I only got admission via the supplementary list and had to take another course. How things have degenerated to this level is scary. Tolu here in Lagos. I'll take just one more and then we get back to to the stories. We'll come back to your messages later. It's just a matter of time before this country is declared bankrupt. Alex in Victoria Island.
Why do people keep saying it's a matter of time before we declare bankrupt? Okay. I'm just trying to reiterate that the statistics and numbers point towards that definition. So let's just accept it for what it is.
From one sad story to the other, Bakers holds bread production Thursday over skyrocketing cost. Now, the bakers under aegis of Premium Bread Makers Association of Nigeria have announced plans to halt production of their product effective Thursday, yesterday. According to a statement, they said operating a bakery in Nigeria has become almost impossible as the incessant increases in the prices of baking materials and diesel have affected the industry negatively.
So this is the point about we're heading towards bankruptcy. So one of the indices that actually tell you how bankrupt you are is number one, the price of a loaf of bread, and also the circumstances around that pricing for a loaf of bread. So last time I checked, the average price of a loaf of bread, Victor, is about 1,000 naira, which just doesn't make any sense when you now begin to look at the daily earnings of individuals in this country.
Mm.
And then when you now begin to look at the circumstances around what bakers have to go through in order to produce that particular one loaf of bread that costs them 1,000 naira, they're already losing money. When you now begin to think of the fact that there's no power to generate the baking machines for them to make bread, and then just all the different taxes and conditions that they're subjected to by the regulators and everything else, these are the kind of questions that you have to ask yourself: are we bankrupt or not? Because when you cannot simply produce bread to feed your nation, then you have a gigantic problem. And we just keep ignoring these things and act like it's normal. There is nothing normal about how skyrocketing the price of bread has become. And that is a direct indicator of how bankrupt your country is, and something you should be scared of. Most places in the world, people will be rioting on the streets. But for us, God day.
Mm. Kuje prison attack. Heads will roll as Buhari receives report indicting officials. Arebashola, that's the Honorable Minister of Interior, has disclosed yesterday that the report identifies all those whose action or inaction led to the unfortunate incident. He has submitted all the names to Mr. President. The box stops at the table of Mr. President. To him, while he was speaking to pressmen, he says, "From this report I gave Mr. President, I tell you, heads will roll." Indeed, are we going to see any reaction to that report?
Well, okay, let me try and be balanced here. There's a larger problem with the security infrastructure in Nigeria, and you have to ask yourself, why is it that a prison located in the Federal Capital Territory was attacked in the manner that it was attacked, where over 800 prisoners were freed? I think, according to the article, only 400 have been able to come back. And then for those that saw the gruesome video, it was quite daring and shocking, which meant, number one, that there was clearly inside help, which is what the Minister of Interior is alluding to, Eric Bashola, by saying that, heads will roll, because clearly he's been able to find out that there were some individuals within the prison system network security, the prison system security network, that aided and abetted these terrorists to be able to come in and free these particular individuals, either by just being complicit, by passing on information, whatever the case may be. So the question is, why is it that our security is compromised from an intelligence point of view in that regard? That's the conversation. And I think it's very difficult because it has to do with personnel. It has to do with how well they're trained, how well they're motivated. Do they understand their job? Do we have the right people for that kind of job? So it's a more complex conversation than just um, the insecurity. So it's now coming to the security framework itself, the infrastructure security framework. And from a Ministry of Interior perspective, these are things that we really need to think hard about. It's okay, what do we need to do to strengthen the personnel that manage our security services so that they're not compromised this particular way? Because I think the overall arcing point is that the prison system, based on the information available to the public in terms of security, are more than equipped to repel this kind of attack, right? From a
Mm-hmm.
personnel and equipment management point of view, if you were to do an inventory, everything will point in that direction. But I think the issue is that even with that inventory, even with that personnel, we still have this challenge. So it's not that they were overpowered, it's just maybe people just didn't respond or fight back. So that's where the real conversation is going. And I think that's what Orek Bashala is alluding to. And the Ministry of Interior and the federal government at large have a lot of work to do with that.
Thank you very much. And then we see your messages across all the platforms. Let's just squeeze this one in and get back to your messages. Chaotic scenes at Lagos Airport as stranded travelers protest dinner air closure. Yesterday, scores of customers were very angry at the abrupt closure of the airline.
Well, how abrupt is it? Is it that Dana Airlines didn't know that they were going to possibly get closed? To that time, I think they received the notification the day before and they announced it, and which is kind of unfair because people obviously have pre-booked tickets, bought tickets to travel, and everything else, and this is part of what the issue is. But I personally think Dana could have done a better job in managing communication and managing their customers, which is very, very critical. And I think the only thing they can do to save face while this ban is going on until they get back online is to make sure they refund people and be able to just keep people excited and just apologize profusely. But I do think they could have done a better job with managing information around this.
Thank you very much. Quickly now, let's look through some of your messages beginning on Twitter. Oye Shalom says, rethink your success mindset. Times are getting tougher. We need tougher mindsets to ensure that we go beyond survive to thrive. And Annie Engineer Strategic, why is the Minister of Interior not resigning as
Hmm.
part of the rolling heads and followed by his incompetent boss? All the heads of POR scapegoats will roll. That's your message there. Ejike Neke on YouTube is saying, have we now agreed that this government is paying subsidy or is it still on the recovery? Okay. Loads and tons of messages on WhatsApp. Let's see how far we can get with them. Tajuddin from Alimosho, this government has got nothing to offer Nigerians from day one. That's your opinion. The economics of Nigeria is very complex and requires mind blowing analysis. This subsidy issue is a big headache, and we're just rotating in circles with our attempts to find a solution. No use comparing ourselves with South Africa, who already have infrastructure on ground. Dakbo sent that in. Davis Umo, banning Okada in all states affected by these bandits is the best to initially curtail the menace, while the ideology reshape will take time. Kidnapping and killing in these regions are crazy. So he's saying if we go ahead and place the ban in those states affected, it will support the government and help. SAT exam in the US is not valid forever. It's only valid for 5 years. Bumi is the one who sent that message in YG. More messages here. JAMB only lowered the cutoff mark so that more people will apply for admission and the varsities will make more money from UTME. They still don't have space to admit students. Oluwatosin, in other climes, the first head to roll should be the Minister of Interior. Okay. Dami too is saying the first head to roll should be the minister whom over a dozen jailbreaks have occurred. The Nigerian elite has continued to wage war on education. Uh, institutions, while their children go to the best schools abroad, and educated citizenry cannot be ruled nor oppressed. A lot of people are still sending in reactions to the heads will roll. But let's look at this one from Ifai. It says that banning motorbikes nationwide is not the panacea to insecurity, but proper management of our borders. I don't really know if it is the standard of education or quality of education that has plummeted, because for Waji to speak fantastic English like this, he must have had quality score in JAMB in his own time. Apparently, he never wrote JAMB, just to put it out there. Anyways, I can bet ₦1,000,000, Victor. No heads will roll and nothing will happen. Has
Hmm.
anyone ever been held accountable in this administration? You'll watch and see. Ugo from Apapa sent that one in. The head rolling better starts with the minister, but then again, we all know how things go in this country. Choma is the one that sent that message to us here in the studio. I'm trying to see if we can take
Yeah, I
more
just
of
want to
your
address
messages.
the
Okay,
SAT one.
quickly,
So
quickly.
SAT scores are technically valid forever, which means they do not have an expiry date. But many universities do not accept scores that are older than 5 years or more. But it doesn't now necessarily reduce the invalidity of it. So it depends on the university you apply to. So the SAT scores are valid forever.
All right. Mecca from Amuwo Dofin. In 2010, deadly riots erupted in Mozambique over rising cost of bread. Similar riots have occurred in
Exactly.
countries in the Middle East. I praise the tenacity of Nigerians, but I think we're getting to the breaking point. Um,
Wonderful point. Wonderful comment.
the solution is easy, and the AG is correct. Once we ban guns, banditry, and terrorism, and all other problems will end. Ibokun on Third Mainland Bridge. Once we add a ban on guns aside motorcycles. Okay, I see that. Thank you very much. Austin is saying Kuje prison break. Some people went inside the bush and cut down a tree, came out and started asking who cut the tree. I don't know what you're talking about. Wale is saying the bakers are not the only users of flour in Nigeria. They should stop harassing the public. The price of bread is not regulated by government. Likewise, all of us operate in the same economy like them. Oluwole. Wale, they are saying diesel cost.
Yeah, uh, I don't understand that point. Okay.
Anyways, Uche is saying these people should go to work, gather intelligence, or use the ones already provided to them. How can you cripple a set of economy in the guise of fighting insecurity? So, if terrorists switch to helicopters or private
Exactly.
airplanes,
Or just walk.
would we come and ban them?
Thank you. Or they just walk.
Get to work, or resign. A message from Uche. Henry comes in here, says, can one of you explain exactly what a country being bankrupt means to the common man or anyone in the country for that matter? Uh,
Not enough time.
okay, yes. If it's just bread, then we can manage. He says they should go and strike for those baking bread. We will manage. Anthony is saying it only takes Aregbe Shola and every one of them serious if the heads that will rule will spread to the military and whoever should give them orders for failing to do so over the past to do so for over 2 hours. Okay, Aisha, quickly. We need new fresh formula for Nigeria. Nigerians, shine your eye. Thank you, YJ, on the SAT. That's for the correction you made there. Oh, we need to go. Yinka Bolu, I see your message. In fact, messages, quite a lot of them. But let me see if I can take only one. Professor of Economics and former CBN governor has been served breakfast. It's easy to throw shades when you are outside till you get inside. JAM valid for 4 years. They should also make it criminal for institutions to make getting transcripts hellish. How can you attend a school and to get certificate and transcripts is like an extreme sport? The messages are so much, but we need to go. Thank you so much, YG, for being a part of the show today with spot on analysis, I must say.
My pleasure.
All right, and let's keep the conversation going on Twitter at Smooth981FM. My name is Pepple. Good morning. The messages were still coming in. Loads and tons of them. There was someone that was saying, "Oh, that retained revenue is different from revenue."
I don't know what that means. What does retained revenue mean?